Hi, I'm Dave, and I'm going to show you guys how to wire up the DSW120 switches. I would like to say this is a very good unit for seniors, very good for residential and some commercial applications. So let's get started. The first switch I have here is the Handicap switch. It comes with mounting screws, and it comes with these wires. For our application with the DSW120, we'll have one wire on this end, and then we're going to wire up to this one that's angled downwards. Now, I'm not going to knock a hole in that box just yet, but I want you to see how I'm wiring this. I've got 18 gauge solid core wire, and it works perfect for this. It really is the size I recommend. This is some old fire wire I had, and really nice stuff to work with. The only thing about this is you get that fiber. Then what I do with that, you can cut it. And generally I just burn it off. Get that out of the way. Now I'm going to strip that, and we'll strip a fair length. I guess I got about 1/4 of an inch there. Now, I've found the best way to wire onto this fine wire that they supply. This is probably 22 gauge, maybe a little less, and it's stranded wire. It's not the easiest stuff to work with, but we can do it. The best way I've found to get these wires going together and get my best connection, short of a soldering gun, is to use a small wire nut. I think the blue or the gray is the size you want. I guess they're marked for 18 gauge, and that gives me a very good secure connection. You may want to come back and put some tape over these. And we are connected there. We'll cut here. Now, to wire into the controller terminals, what I've done is I've pulled the cap right off. It's a lot easier to wire when you do that. From my diagram, I know I have to go into the second one down and the fourth one down. Make sure you give yourself play between the two wires. Now, with this jeweler's screwdriver, I can tighten down and get a good connection. Not always the easiest thing to see. I found that with using 18 gauge wire, this block will accommodate two 18 gauge wires for two switches. If you go bigger than 18 gauge, it's not going to fit, and then you may end up pigtailing. I don't think you can even get a 12 gauge wire in there. I think it's probably 14 gauge max. Don't quote me on that. But 18 gauge is a common size. It's commonly referred to as doorbell wire or thermostat wire. and it's cheap. It's the way to go. Now, one of the other problems that I've encountered is you can't always use the access hole in the base plate to run your wires through. Sometimes you have to go through the end cap, and I just took a 3/8 drill and my wires will go right through. And you could drill perhaps lower or anywhere you want. How you want to do it is up to you. I guess towards the back, down low would be best. Without the casement, the wires do slip through. And then I would go to a raceway molding or a modular conduit and run it that way. So that's all I got for this switch. Next we're going to move into the wireless switches. Okay, here we are with our wireless switch. Real nice, sturdy handicap switch. And we have our receiver. They supply us with a wiring connection. And here again, these are small gauge wires. Now, our wiring diagram shows that we use red and black, yellow and green. White is for a different purpose, different setup. For the standard DSW120 or DSW100, these are the four that you will use. Now, as I showed earlier, these are really fine gauge wires. Just not the easiest thing to work with, but it can be done, and I'm going to be using my 18 gauge solid core. So I found that the small wire nut works best. If you're good at soldering and you've got that equipment, go for it. It's better than these. This is what I prefer to use. So I've got red and black. I'll keep those two together. I think my wire cutter has seen better days. There she is. Okay, so I've got my red to red. I'm gonna go black to black. Alrighty. Everybody in there. Give it a good twist. I'll probably come back and tape these later on. Now, red and black. That's easy. But now I have another set. I have yellow and green. So you kind of got to keep this straight in your head, either with using a marker, wiring tags, what have you. Because when I get in the box, everything is going to be red to black. And out here, I've got different colors. So I chose to put my dark green with the black, and I'm going to put my yellow with the red, and I'm pretty sure I can remember that. Our wiring has to go in the right terminals, so you want to keep that information straight one way or the other. So these are my receiver wires. So before we go any further, we've got a jumper here in the middle. 3 prongs are exposed, and this accommodates 2. We want our jumper on the bottom 2. Then we've got 2 tabs on top, and we've got 2 tabs there, and that plugs in. So our next point, we'll be wiring this into our controller. Now, like I said before, you may not be able to use the access point on the back plate, so I've chosen to just drill a little hole in my end cap, and I'll be running conduit between this and that unit. Keep your wires long. You may change your mind where you want things. So with this, I know from my instructions, my red and black go into my first and second. My yellow and green will go into the third. My green will go into the third, and my yellow will go into the 6th. So, as I mentioned earlier, you have to keep this straight. Which is your red and black setup? Which is your yellow and green setup? There's one thing about doing bench work, it's a whole lot easier. I know that this particular wire contains my red and black. Again, I want to stress the wire size. 18 gauge solid core is perfect. You don't want to use braided. It's hard to work with. With 18 gauge, you'll be able to put 2 of these into one terminal point, which you may do if you have other sensor components that require the same terminals. Keep in mind, these do unplug. So our instructions tell us our red is going in the first block, and our black is going into the second. Want to keep some pressure on that. Make sure you're getting a good connection. Handy dandy jeweler screwdriver. Tightens them up real nicely. Don't over tighten and don't over loosen. Okay, so there's my red and black. Then I'll move on to my green and yellow. Now I know that my dark green is going to the black. Ooh, that's plenty. You don't need too much wire exposed. I cut that one. That probably should have some tape. So my dark green is going to be going into the third terminal now. And I need to open that terminal point up. Don't try and loosen them too much. If you're struggling there, you may have the wrong size wire. I don't mean to block the view, but gotta do what I gotta do. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, and I'm happy. My yellow wire is going to be going into the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th one down, which is my middle one on this bottom block. If you can do some of this without being on a ladder, God bless you. It's the way to go. Okay, so I'm going to plug back in my first set and plug in my second block, and there we have it. So next I'll be showing you how to program your switches. Okay, here we are with the remote control switches. I found there's two different styles. I think one is an old style. There may be still some of them out there. Inside we have dip switches, and what I want, and I'll go into those in a little bit. One switch has an on-off, and one switch has an open-close. And we'll go into the detail of those here. Okay, on this particular switch, this is the older style, and here we have an open setting and a closed setting. You want this dip switch to be on open. Here we have 4 dip switches. Now, when you have 2 switches, you want these settings to be the same. Up is on and down is off. Now, what I found is if you have 2 adjacent bathrooms using these, you don't want one switch to open both bathrooms. So then you would change your configuration and perhaps have your men's room with 1 up, 3 down, and your women's bathroom with the first one down and the 4th one up. What I've found too is that if you have really thick walls, you may want to change your frequency by having 2 switches in the up position and perhaps 2 in the down position. If you're talking a stone wall, a bad reception area, you may want to try it with all 4 switches up. Just make sure you have the same switches up and the same switches down in your pair of switches, or however many your switches you're using. So that's the detail on that. Now I'll show you the detail on the new version. And here we have an on-off switch. We want this switch on. Here we have our 4 small dip switches, and here again both switches on that circuit should be paired the same, and this is the newer version 3.0. Both of them program the same, and we'll look at that in just a minute. Now with these switches, one thing I'll say, if you're using these on the exterior of a building and you've got cold weather, get some good high quality batteries. The other thing, I like to program these before I mount them because it's just easier. The other thing is, when you push the switch, you'll get that red indicator light. You know your batteries are good. So we're set up to encode. Now what I'm going to do is push and hold this small button. I currently have a green power indicator. I'll push and hold until it turns red. When it's red, I push my handicap switch button, just any of the contact points, no risk of shock, and this button is programmed. I would like to say only program one switch at a time. Now this is another version of switch. It has a small screw on the base so you can get at the batteries. These work really well on a wheelchair. You could put some Velcro on the back and it's right there on the arm of the chair. It's good for people who can't reach the switch or just don't have the dexterity. These encode a little differently. They don't require a receiver. What I'll do is push and hold my encode button. I get the tone. I push my button and the tone is clicked. Now this switch is programmed. Okay, our final unit is the keychain fob remote. A very powerful little remote, very good range. If you have to, the shield slides up in front to protect your battery. I will tell you the batteries are difficult to change in these. Small screws, you may want to take it to a jeweler or whoever does your watch batteries. Now, to encode this, I'll tap the encode button, press any button on the remote, and the remote is encoded. Again, only do one at a time. Wait for your door to shut before you program the second one. These also have two other functions. They have the B button, which will hold the door open indefinitely. Now when you go to close, you'll press the D button. Take note, there is a delay. Whatever you have your hold open time set at, it's going to delay that amount of time. Also, we have the A button, which is a lock button. It's a good day lock. I would not secure my building overnight with this, but it's handy for residential daytime. And here again, to clear the lock, I simply push the D button. The door opens, the door is unlocked. When the door is locked, wired switches will not be able to function, and wireless switches will not function as either. I'll demonstrate that here. A, the door is locked. If I press this switch, it will not open. The door is locked. To unlock that door, I'll have to press D. The door is unlocked. I'll have that delay. Now when I press the wireless button, the door will function. The door is successfully unlocked. Keep that in mind. Your wired switches, your wireless switches will not work when the door is locked. If you have good dexterity, these are great. They're small buttons and they're not so good with big fingers. Keep that in mind as well. With that, there's one last thing I'd like to reiterate. When you mount these units, things need to be level. Now here, I have good level on my track. I have good level on my motor. And my pitch is a little bit off. It probably could be shimmed out, but the door does function very nicely. A light touch opens the door manually. With that, I wish you well, and You'll find these are very good. The DSW120 is a very good unit for residential use and some commercial applications as well. Thank you.